Hi, my name is Gerry Beauchemin, and I'm a longtime friend of Gerry and Michelle Amirault. I'm also the new administrator for Tentmaker Ministries and websites. If you've not yet heard the news, I'm sorry to inform you that both Michelle and Gerry went on to be with the Lord last year, 2018. Michelle on July 31st after a long illness, and Gerry on November 3rd due to an adverse reaction from some recently prescribed medications. This was such a shock to all of us who knew and loved them, which includes people from all over the world. This is part 1 of 3 in my personal tribute video series about Gerry and Michelle Amirault. Just weeks before Michelle passed, my wife Denise and I spent 5 days with them. It was an awesome and difficult time. Denise spent most of her time with Michelle and I with Gerry. At that point, it was quite difficult to understand Michelle's speech, but Denise did real well. She was my translator for the most part. You know, Gerry was totally devoted to Michelle, caring for her needs from early morning till bedtime. She was in home hospice care with a visiting nurse coming several times a week. But Gerry was her full-time caregiver. Michelle couldn't do much on her own anymore. Feeding her was the most difficult thing at that stage because her throat muscles were so weak she could hardly swallow. When Gerry would feed her, he had to have a suction tube machine by her side to aspirate any food she would choke on. A few times during meals, we didn't think Michelle would make it. It was horrible. And Gerry had to feed Michelle at every meal, day in, day out, week after week, month after month. Only God gave him the strength. It was obvious he was energized by a deep love for his wife. And while we were there, Gerry and I would go off together to talk, go for walks, or ride 5 minutes to town and visit with some people he knew here and there. On that Sunday, Father's Day, he asked me if we could do a video together, focusing on fatherhood in context of my new book, and we did. A number of times while he was talking to me about his life with Michelle, he would break down and cry. Seeing his wife wasting away before his eyes was more than he could bear. Only God sustained him. It was a privilege, though. It was hard for us to be there and witness their lives at such a difficult time. Michelle, in spite of her condition, was always smiling. She was positive and encouraging, always wanted to make sure we had what we needed, and so did Gerry for that matter. Gerry liked to make fun of my diet, telling me he would never eat my leafy greens, grains, nuts, and bird seeds, as he called them. You know, in the midst of all the pain, there were uplifting moments when Gerry talked about his vision for the gospel and all that he felt God was inspiring him to do, including all kinds of video ideas. Even just a few weeks after we left, in July, he did one more Tentmaker video from before Michelle passed. It's amazing. We haven't released it yet. There's a few more things that need to be done, but it'll be coming soon. In August, a couple of days after Michelle passed, I went back to Missouri to be there for Gerry and help him prepare the venue for Michelle's celebration of life. In that context, of all his tears and heartache surrounding that event, I saw a special moment of excitement in Gerry while he was driving his car. For a few moments, I saw that spark in his eyes as he talked about great things he saw coming ahead for what God would do in his life and with Tentmaker. For one I know of, he longed to see Tentmaker articles, books, and videos translated into Mandarin so all China could have access to the victorious gospel of Jesus Christ. He mentioned that a lot, but perhaps his biggest dream in prayer was to see the word hell and even the concept of hell finally removed out of all Bible translations. And it's happening in our time more and more. Gerry and Michelle, for sure, have left their mark on the world in all these things. There's so much I could share about Gerry since we met 18 years ago. I would have never thought back then that someday we would become close friends. He's a true gift from God. I've spent hundreds of hours with Gerry on the phone, no exaggeration. And I'll end this part by saying 3 things about this man that has marked my life and challenged me to the core. He was both humble and bold. He never hesitated to share his weaknesses and failures. Yet he seemed to fear nothing and no one but God. But, like a little child who dreads his daddy's discipline, God was his loving daddy. My time with him always inspired me and left me stronger in my faith. Gerry was truly a modern-day Apostle Paul, and nothing less. Finally, I hope you'll read his daughter Elena's Dear Dad letter on the Tentmaker tribute page at the very bottom. It was read to everyone at Gerry's memorial on November 8th, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. In closing, if you've been blessed by the Amiraults over the years, or just recently, we invite you to leave your tribute. We hope you visit Tentmaker and discover the treasures it contains about God's unfailing, unending love for all people. And subscribe to this channel to keep abreast of our upcoming videos. God loves you with an everlasting love.